I was working on Oklahoma for Cameron McIntosh in the Bristol Hippodrome, and stage management said, right in the middle of my rehearsal, Cameron McIntosh is on the phone, and I said, well, tell him I can't speak now. I'm in the middle of getting Ado Annie into the show. And they said he insists. So I went to the phone and he said, you are to go to meet Andrew Lloyd Webber on the train tomorrow very early. And I said, no, I'm going back to London. I was newly married and I wanted to get back to London. And there was quite a row between us, and in the end he said, no, you are going, and you'll be met at the station by Andrew Lloyd Webber. So I thought, well, then that's an interesting reason. So I duly got on the train. I was met by Andrew, who drove me himself to Sidmonton. And he told me a bit about it on the way. Not much, talked about all sorts of other things. Gave me a glass of white wine, sat down, started playing.
Now my sister, for instance, who lives in the hills that lie on the border of Shropshire and Wales, in a comfortable house where her husband fulfills his vocation of retail purveyor of ales. She says, and for me, I've no reason to doubt her opinion, repeated in dozens of chats. She says there is one thing she can't do without, and that's pollicle dogs and jellicle cats.
I'd read the book on the train. I'd never seen it before. Isn't that terrible? I'd never seen it in my life. I read it avidly because it's short. So I had all those marvellous characters in my brain. About the third number in, I was so excited because I could hear how beautifully he'd matched the music to T.S. Eliot's words, what a wedding it was, and that was very exciting for me. So I started to talk. And he was talking, and this went on throughout the entire playing of the score as it was then. We then had a lovely lunch and talked some more, played me a bit more, took me to the train, and I went home. And I thought, well, I won't get that job because actually we didn't hear what the other one was saying. We were talking because we were both very thrilled. However, as soon as he'd got me on the train, apparently he rang Cameron and said, that's who I want to do it. The very first thing Andrew said to me was, this is going to be a dance show. Will have to be a dance show to get the wit of the characters into people dressed as cats. What I did was I went to New York and took every single jazz class, modern class that I could, just so that my body was very, very fit indeed, because I knew I'd have to find those movements on my own body, so I wanted it to be working well. I studied my own two little tiny cats, one called Scarlet and one called Rhett. And I studied the T.S. Eliot words. I studied the score, and with all of that in place, eventually went into the month of pre-work.
Jerry and a rumble tease. We're a notorious couple of cats.
I gave a very pulverizing class every day to my little unit, and it was the class that I made up that I was going to eventually teach the kids who did the show, because we had to find new ways of moving. And so I worked it out then. And also Andrew had said that Paul Nicholas, who had been so brilliant doing all the songs beforehand and at the Sidmonton Festival, but was not a dancer. He wanted him to play the rum-tum tugger, and we had already made a rule that everybody in the show had to be a brilliant dancer. And so Andrew said, do you think you can teach Paul? And I said, well, if Paul is willing to put up with it, I'm sure, yes, I can. So poor Paul, every single morning he did this pulverizing class, sweating away in order to keep up, to be able to dance. staged a good 3/4 of the numbers in the pre-work before I ever got near the cast, because we only had 5.5 weeks rehearsal, and I knew I would never get there if I hadn't planned a lot of it up front. And I did the whole of the Rum Tum Tugger number in the pre-work as a present to Paul, because that was going to be his number. So I thought, well, if he's submitting himself to this hefty work, the least I can do is stage his number early.
For me to spout it.
For he will do as he did do.
There's no doing anything about
What was difficult was when we started rehearsing and we realized that we needed that Grisabella link. We didn't have that at the beginning. And we had no opening to Act 2 at all. There were all sorts of things that were thrown up as we were doing it. And that wasn't difficult, but it was fast. We had our backs against the wall, you know, to get that done well and to make things click. And for instance, our leading dancer was Wayne Sleep. When we started the pre-work, we had an idea that his solo would be something quite other than it eventually turned out to be, and that changed because of how we had to put the numbers together. And in the end, I had to make Wayne's dance up to a drum beat. I had no music for it.
And we all say,
Oh, well, I never was there ever a cat so clever as magical Mr. Mistopheles.
I knew this space, and I knew it to be a wonderful space. What was very hard to choreograph Cats in this space, as you see, it's a circle. You have no wings. You can't have a wonderful thrust, an exciting thrust of people, for instance, attacking other people, and take them into the wing and bring them on again. In the Jericho Ball, for instance, which is 13 minutes of solid dance, so it's really a ballet. As there is, this is a very exciting bit where people rush across stage, but then because it's the round, because they can't go off and, as they would in an ordinary theatre, rush up the wing and come on again, you have to create another excitement somewhere else where everybody's focus goes, so you reassemble those forces. And to do that for a whole night, which it really is quite tricky. reached the point in the Jellicle Ball, it's about 11 minutes in, and it was right in the middle of the huge finale of it. And I had to come up with something very exciting, and it's now known as the Princess Louise. This step has been taught all over the world, and you hear pianists and dance assistants saying, "Yeah, let's take it from the Princess Louise," and people who don't know go, "What? What's that?" It's not from the jetés de crosse, or it's not from the pirouettes, or it's not from the leaps, it's from the Princess Louise. And it's because I was held up outside that pub in my car, resenting the time I'd had to be away from work. And the whole of that step, I made it up with my feet there and then in the car, rushed back to work, left the car on the pavement, rushed in and said, "Quick, quick, drop what you're doing. I want to teach you this before I lose it." I think we were all very frightened in the beginning because this show, a lot of people had said this show couldn't work, a show about cats. I was confident about one thing, and that was that the words are so great, and as I said earlier, I think Andrew's matching of them is so great, that I knew the choreography would stand up, not really because of me, because of what I'd been able to find to support both the words and the music. As I said, a lot of the storytelling, the majority of the storytelling is inherent in the choreography. And there are brilliant characters, so that, for instance, Bustopher's walk, that funny little walk. John came to me in the pre-work and said, what were my feelings about that character? How was I going to make him move? And I went into a long thing about how the guy had always been brought up in silk sheets, how he would have been trained from a little toddler to hold his back up and be like a little military person. So I've worked out this walk for him, and you pinch your buttocks tightly and move from the heel, and it's very sort of hoity-toity. And John loved that, and we then worked together, and he designed that fantastic, great big coat of Bustopher's with this tiny little V in front where the little walk could show. And it was a pure piece of collaboration. So I knew that the characters were going to be, dance-wise, interesting, because they were more interesting than anybody else had written about for some time. I mean, T.S. Eliot is a major, wonderful poet. Whether a whole dance show would hang together, whether we had, we all had this one idea that it had to move swiftly, swiftly as a running river before people had time to find out and say to themselves, what is this? What is this about? You know, because we were then not sure of the strength of the Grisabella story. We were not sure whether the sensuality and the sexuality that I had tried to build into the show, because that's how cats are, would work, whether a lot of the movements I'd created for people's bottoms and things, whether that would hold, whether people would think that's peculiar, or whether it would turn them on. I mean, that was all a big question mark because it was so different. So I think the first previews were very nerve-wracking for us. I mean, we used to stand out on the steps wondering whether we should come in and see it or slink to the bar and have a big drink to give us courage. And when we first did the show, the cast could hardly get through it because it is an exhausting show. Now the cast get through it pretty easily. Not easily, it's always an exhausting show, but then when you're doing, it's like running a 4-minute mile for the first time, when you're having to break a new rule with physical exercise, it's tough. And they were, the first 3 or 4 previews, they were out for the count. From a dancer's point of view, this show has got like a club worldwide, because people who've been in it, you experience quite a bit of pain getting through this show. It's tiring. And to dance the Jellicle Ball, you have to find a lot of strength in your lungs and things. And people who meet in other countries, who find they've been in CATS, form an instant rapport. And often when I've been doing another show in another country, and I say, okay, that's a break for 15 minutes, you suddenly hear, you think, is that CATS I hear them humming it. And you go out and look in the green room and they're dancing bits of the Jellicle Ball or bits of the Tugger. They're doing bits of this show because they're pitting their experiences. And that, I find that very moving and very humbling, that my steps, if you like, my work, my strange new movements are shared all over the world. It's very humbling and very exciting. I think the White Cat's dance which is about a little cat in puberty discovering her own body. I think that's probably a very original piece of choreography. And quite proud of the Tugger number, which was done, as I told you, long before rehearsals, because I think it does make him look anarchic and wicked and yet innocent at the same time. So it's so different from the White Cat's dance. I found the challenges in shooting the video of this show. First of all, I had to form a company to make the video in 3.5 weeks. So therefore I had to use people who'd been in it before, but the best we could muster. So it was welding a company that becomes a tribe, because this show is about a tribe of cats who worship an old man, who make a show to show off for him, to try and show how worthy they are. It's all to do with the tribe. And so if you can't just get a lot of brilliant dancer, actors, singers together and make a show, you have to weld them into a tribe. And because they knew they were going to go down in history, really, because they all adored the show, because they knew we were up against it for time. I can only describe it as a sort of spiritual rapport happened between us. A, we all adored the show. B, we knew we were up against it. And C, they kind of knew that it was on my back to get them there. And I never had a day's problem with anyone. Everyone pulled together. They all liked each other very much. They all egged each other on. And so something very special was hanging in the air as we made this video. I didn't actually change the choreography. I staged some of the staging of the Grisabella story so that that worked much better for camera than has been made to work in the round. I created new stuff for the Tugger to do because I wanted to stay with him and not go to the ensemble doing something at the point where he normally goes into the audience. I did all sorts of little extra bits of storytelling to try to make the video work for people who had never seen the show, so that it would have the impact that people feel when they're in a theatre.